There.
Yeah, we may have a technical. Just check her mic so we can have her do the prayers and get started. Morning, members. Just a technical matter. We're just getting resolved. Trust that everyone has enjoyed their time that we've been away, and looking forward to a bright and full session.
Sorry, can you hear me? Mr. Speaker?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. The
No
Lord
problem.
be with you. And with thy
You can get into the prayer now.
Okay. The Lord be with you and with thy spirit. Let us pray. Lord, have mercy upon us. Christ, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness hast appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of importance for us in these islands. Let thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands, and of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of thy Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Thank you. Members, the minutes of the December 11th sitting have been circulated. Are there any objections or omissions that need to be made? Any amendments, rather? There are none. The minutes are confirmed as printed. I have received notice this morning from the Minister of Finance that he has extended his apologies, that he'll be absent today. Just on that duly noted. There are no messages from the governor. Oh, sorry. I jumped ahead. Then I got to the announcements. I should have announced the minister, sorry. There is no message from the governor. The announcement from the speaker I just gave is that the minister extends his apologies. There are no messages from the Senate. There are papers and communications to be tabled this morning. We have papers this morning from the first is from the Minister of Works. Minister, would you like to send your papers and communications?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly the Bermuda Housing Trust financial statements, March 31st, 2020, and the West End Development Corporation Annual Report 2019.
Minister of Health, are you ready?
Yes, I am, Mr. Speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. You can present yours now.
I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Number 3 Amendment Number 4 Regulations 2020, the Quarantine COVID-19 Number 3 Amendment Number 7 Order 2020, the Quarantine COVID-19 Number 3 Amendment Number 8 Order 2020, the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Number 3 Amendment Regulations 2021, the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Number 3 Amendment Number 2 Regulations 2021, the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Regulations 2021, the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Order 2021, the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Amendment Regulations 2021, the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Amendment Number 2 Regulations 2021, and the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Amendment Number 3 Regulations 2021.
Thank you, Minister. Petitions, there are none. Statements by ministers. We have statements this morning.
Mr. Speaker.
Beg your pardon?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, good morning.
Just a question. In all the papers that the Honorable Minister just tabled, I don't see online yet the Public Health COVID Emerging Powers Regulations 2020. Can it just be confirmed it's online? I might have missed it. There's so many put up this morning.
I believe they all are online. Mr. Lamb was endeavoring to make sure that everything was online. I haven't checked myself, but I'm sure
Okay,
I'm getting acknowledgement that yes, they are online.
okay, I'll double check. And the statements are online at the present time as well?
The statements will be SharePoint. Go on SharePoint. Go to SharePoint and you'll see everything on the SharePoint.
Okay, it's not downloading, but I'll double check.
Okay, thank you. There are no petitions. We'll now move to statements. We have statements this morning. The first statement is from the Minister of Health. Minister, would you like to put your statement?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. I am pleased to highlight for this honorable House and the public that today the government will be tabling amendments to the Bermuda Health Council Act 2004 to bring about important and overdue changes to the high cost of medications faced by many Bermudians. Our high cost of healthcare, an aging population, and an increasing incidence of chronic diseases such as diabetes all contribute to the burden felt by many in our community. Even though we can appreciate that science continues to give us new medications and treatments for managing our health, it has been clear for at least the last 10 years that our people are concerned about the price they have to pay for these medicines. For example, in the Health Council's 2017 Health Services Survey, residents clearly said that medication was too expensive and that they needed more help getting medicines for the elderly. Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Labor Party heard the cry of residents, and today we are taking steps to address this. Mr. Speaker, the largest out-of-pocket health spending for members in our community is on medication. Just looking at insurance claims, more than 1 in every 5 claims is for a prescription medication. The only claim higher is for people getting services at the hospital. According to the most recent National Health Accounts report, medications accounted for at least 5.7% of total healthcare spending in fiscal year 2017-18. The Council indicates that it is at least that amount because there are large pockets of spending and use of prescription medications that are not part of the collected data. The system right now just is not set up to properly track how many medications we buy, sell, or use. While insurance covers 80% of the cost of the majority of medications that we use, some medications cost tens of thousands of dollars. And for those with chronic conditions, having to pay that 20% of every single medication that you need really adds up. For seniors on Future Care, the coverage for medication comes with a cap of $2,000 a year. While financial assistance pays for its clients to receive prescription medications, those not on financial assistance but with the health insurance plan must pay for all their medications out of pocket. This has been highlighted during the current coronavirus pandemic as more and more companies are moving their employees to HIP and leaving them without equitable access to medication. Mr. Speaker, in an age where access to medications is not equitable or even promised, medications that can keep people out of the hospital or away from life-changing complications, we need to have more regulations to combat their cost. Right now, cost controls, price setting, cost regulation, cost limits, and additional fees for medications are privately set by private companies without government control or intervention. While all pharmaceuticals must be purchased abroad and are imported duty-free, there's a lack of clarity around the pricing structure of drugs at the final point of sale to the public. Investigations undertaken by the Health Council, including extensive stakeholder consultation with public and private insurers, pharmaceutical wholesalers, pharmacy owners, the Pharmacy Council, physician representatives, and others, has identified that the introduction of a national drug formulary as an appropriate means by which drug affordability could be pursued. This was not an original concept from the Council, but part of recommendations that had been made over time in multiple expert reports, such as the Orton Report, Arthur Anderson Report, and the Todd Report. Mr. Speaker, honorable members may be aware that under Section 5H of the Bermuda Health Council Act 2004, the Health Council has authority to, quote, regulate the price at which drugs are sold to the public, end quote. This was established at its inception to be a part of its mandate, and until now, the Council has not exercised this authority because it has not yet developed the necessary regulatory regime and the regulations did not exist. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the Bermuda Health Council Amendment Act 2021 being tabled today is to support the function of the Council in regulating the price at which drugs are sold to the public by establishing in law the Bermuda Health Council Drug Formulary Regulations 2021. To be clear, Mr. Speaker, the purpose is not to control the price of every medication sold in Bermuda. Rather, the Bermuda Drug Formulary will comprise a list of common essential medications, such as metformin, which is used for type 2 diabetes, or prednisone, which is used in the treatment of arthritis, blood disorders, cancer, and eye problems, along with other associated products and devices used in medical treatments, which are intended to be medically appropriate, cost-effective, and sold at a regulated price. Mr. Speaker, this work of determining what is on the list will be carried out by the new Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, which is appointed by the Minister of Health in consultation with the Health Council. The main function of the committee is to advise the Council on the Bermuda Drug Formulary. The committee will be appropriately representative of industry, including a member from the Council's board to be the chairperson and a member of the Council Secretariat, a representative of the local pharmaceutical market nominated by the Pharmacy Council, a representative of the local health services market nominated by a registered health statutory board such as the Bermuda Medical Council, an international representative of a pharmaceutical market in the region, and others representing relevant areas of health expertise as appropriate, such as cancer specialists, pharmacy owners, dietitians, senior patients advocates, and GPs, as determined by the Minister and Council, and up to a maximum of 9 people at any given time. Mr. Speaker, the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee will have a key role in, among other matters, evaluating drug utilization in Bermuda and assessing new drug classes and clinical indications. The committee will determine how medical products will be added to or deleted from the drug formulary. The committee will develop its recommendations on the list of medications for the drug formulary for final approval of the Bermuda Medical Council. To support understanding of the local use of medications and conditions that can best treat, the Council will have the authority to require the submissions of select data from insurers, pharmacies, medical practices,
at 7 and just take us through to the end of it.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, the top of page 7, with the top of page 7.
I'll tell you what, the paragraph that begins, Minister, Mr. Speaker, the new regulations will be also provide the council with.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the new regulations will also provide the council with the ability to participate as a negotiator on behalf of Bermuda in the procurement of medical products. The council may partner with a local pharmacy or importer to assist in securing the best possible drug prices for the Bermuda public. It has been said in the past that Bermuda could do much better when it comes to negotiating improved prices out on the international prescription drug market. Mr. Speaker, pharmaceuticals are clinically medications which are the most effective non-behavioral intervention for non-communicable diseases. Pharmaceutical intervention saves money and interrupts the cost and burden of disease progression, but doing so with efficiency requires cost control. As such, the implementation of regulations that support the function of the Bermuda Health Council in regulating the price at which drugs are sold to the public will provide welcome benefit to the community. Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Labor Party promised Bermuda in 2020 party platform that it would establish a national drug formulary that will set maximum pricing for common essential medications, which reduce costs to consumers. Mr. Speaker, promises made and promises delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We appreciate your assisting us at that time. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Labor. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Since my appointment to the Ministry of Labor, I have remained steadfast and focused on achieving the Ministry's mission of creating policy which helps grow the economy and create jobs. I rise today to introduce the Economic Investment Certificate and Residential Certificate Policy. Mr. Speaker, Economic Investment Certificate and Residential Certificate Policy ensures a minimum investment in the Bermuda economy, and unlike the previous residential certificate policies, the Economic Investment Certificate has clear criteria for holders to be eligible to apply for the right to reside in Bermuda indefinitely while contributing persons were prohibited from obtaining gainful employment under the policy, and they were required to have substantial means. The substantial means requirement was particularly contentious because of court challenges that arose from certificate refusals. Additionally, the previous policies did not provide an incentive for those affluent persons to directly invest in Bermuda. The new Economic Investment Certificate and Residential Certificate Policy addresses all these issues by targeting a different audience of persons who seek to invest directly in Bermuda and thus expand the economy. It also solves the problem of qualifying substantial means by shifting the measurement from considering an individual's net worth to simple measurement of the investment. An economic investment certificate will require people who are granted the right to live in Bermuda to first make an economic investment of $2.5 million or more in the island. This requirement will allow Bermuda to capitalize on having more people living on the island while also benefiting from those who have significant financial needs. If at or after 5 years, the economic investment certificate holder decides he or she would like to reside in Bermuda indefinitely, the holder may apply for the residential certificate. It is important to note that moving forward, one must possess an economic investment certificate in order to be eligible for a residential certificate. If successful, a residential certificate will be granted. This will give the holder, as well as the holder's spouse and or dependents, the right to reside in Bermuda for an indefinite period. The holder will also be granted automatic approval to work in the business to which he or she may have invested or work in any other business. If the spouse of the dependent of a residential certificate holder's desire to work in Bermuda, they will be subject to Bermuda's work permit policy. Mr. Speaker, an economic investment certificate application can make a minimum investment in Bermuda in any of one or more of the following ways: purchase Bermuda citizens real estate, whether residential or commercial; purchase Bermuda government bonds to be held for a minimum of 5 years; contribute to Bermuda sinking fund for the purpose of debt reduction; contribute to the newly established Bermuda Trust Fund; donate to a registered Bermuda charity in areas of sports development, youth, seniors, and health; make a direct or indirect equity investment in an existing Bermuda-based business, including BSX listed entities, but excluding where the investment is limited to holdings listed securities in exempt undertakings; invest in the development and launch of a new Bermuda-based business, or invest in such other social or useful ventures that benefits Bermuda, Bermudians, and deems Bermudian as may be determined by the Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Economic Investment Certificate policy is a superior policy to our current residential certificate policy because it is designed to generate direct investment in Bermuda and stimulate ongoing economic activity. Mr. Speaker, affluent individuals around the world seek to live in societies that meet certain criteria. They often seek safety, stability, sophisticated, connected places with a comfortable climate and a rule of law. Of utmost importance is they seek a place where they feel comfortable with their children. These individuals and their families have the means to make significant financial investments, develop businesses, and create job opportunities, which can benefit Bermudians. Bermuda must take advantage of these opportunities. Mr. Speaker, the Economic Investment Certificate is good for Bermuda because it is a measured and controlled method of allowing Bermuda to increase its current residential population with individuals who will create immediate value to our economy. Mr. Speaker, it is good for Bermuda because it fully harnesses immigration as one of many tools for creating economic growth for Bermuda, as it will enable business development, supporting jobs, and increase social finance, which will aid local charities. The government of Bermuda welcomes individuals who are in a position to invest a substantial sum into our island and take advantage of our new economic investment certificate and enjoy the ability to reside in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, I pause here to ask that we take a moment to imagine the impact of, let's say, 100 persons being granted the economic investment certificate over the next 10 years. That will generate $250 million into the economy and facilitate continued economic activity for years to come. I know that many Bermudian businesses and homeowners are already enjoying the benefits from the impact of the Work from Bermuda residential policy and are looking forward to that initiative being extended. The impact of 100 economic investment certificate holders will be far greater, as their upfront and continued investment will potentially impact the real estate market, the construction industry, the retail and restaurant industry, and much more, given the economic activity spurred as a result of this policy. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda is not alone in its efforts to stimulate its economy. Since the onset of the pandemic, nations everywhere are looking at ways to leverage its immigration policies to achieve this aim. Given Bermuda's natural beauty, its first-class infrastructure, its handling of the pandemic, and of course our people, Bermuda can become first choice for those seeking the quality of life that we enjoy every day. Mr. Speaker, the effective date of this policy is 1st of March 2021. A fee of $2,625 will be charged for the issuance of the certificate in accordance with the existing government fee schedule. The government has established a concierge service to facilitate the submission and approval process as appropriate for the affluent investors target. The The Department of Immigration partnered with the Bermuda government, concierge, and the Bermuda Business Development Agency to ensure that a high-touch service is provided. Thank you to all stakeholders from the public and private sectors who have assisted in the implementation planning for the certificate. Investors may register their expression of interest, and obtain full information at www.bda.bm. Mr. Speaker, I will close with a quote from former U.S. President Obama, who said, and I quote, "If it is orderly and lawful, immigration is good for the economy." This revised residential certificate is indeed orderly and lawful. And like the work from Bermuda certificate, it will prove to be better than good for the Bermuda economy, as it will provide the economic stimulus needed to turn Bermuda in the right direction. In these problematic financial times, the economic activity will undoubtedly result in jobs and greater prosperity for Bermudians. For this reason, I look forward to all of Bermuda welcoming those persons who will be granted an economic investment certificate and a residential certificate in the coming months. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is in that of the name of the Minister of Works. Mr. Birch?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Speaker, good morning again. Mr. Speaker, earlier I laid before this Honorable House the West End Development Corporation's annual report for the year 2019. Mr. Speaker, the year 2019 was another extremely busy and exciting year for the corporation, with the completing of major investment and restoration projects critical to supporting one of the core functions, which is to be Bermuda's premier port destination. These consistent efforts were recognized again when the corporation, for the fourth year in a row, won the Cruise Critics' Choice Destination Award. This award is awarded by consumer voting throughout the region, highlighting the best cruise port destination in the Eastern Caribbean, Bahamas, and Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the major capital projects included the King's Wharf upgrade, completing the purchase of the 2 new structures that were erected at the government quarry, which now assists the ministry delivering a dedicated heavy machine garage building and larger location to house the government stores section. Phase 1 solar project was delivered, and the corporation is now seeing significant energy savings of more than $30,000 per month. Replacement of the Rose Island Village fresh and flushing water system, as well as upgrading the sewage infrastructure for the entire village. REDCO has and remains committed to annually investing in the refurbishment and upgrade of our residential inventory. Mr. Speaker, highlighted performance accomplishments included continued increase in revenue, continued retail growth, expansion of new retail and experience businesses, the launching to market of the new Prince Alfred Terrace short-term rental units, completion of all hurricane damage works, and focusing on working with small contractors so they are able to acquire contracts for many of the restoration and small to medium capital projects. Mr. Speaker, I'll now move on the annual report for the year 2019, which continued in high gear with the continuation of an extensive capital investment program for the items previously mentioned, as well as further enhancing and maintaining critical infrastructure in many historic buildings. Mr. Speaker, the financial report highlights for 2019 show REDCO assets of $141,118,706 and liabilities of $72,425,925. Total revenues of $20,609,240 and expenses at $19,127,731. The result was an annual surplus of $1,481,509. Mr. Speaker, the highlighted accomplishments include winning the Cruise Critics' Choice Destination Award, remaining focused on their legislative objective, which is to develop the vested lands, completing all border cruise objectives, as well as several large capital projects, and leading the way with a large solar initiative. Mr. Speaker, the last point to note is that I wish to be it to be acknowledged that WECO consistently delivers their specific goals and objectives. I'd like to thank the outgoing chairman, Mr. Charlton Deal, the new chairman, Mr. Neville Tyrrell, the WECO board of directors, General Manager Andrew Diaz, and his entire team for their outstanding effort. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I believe the next statement is also yours. Would you like to deliver that one now?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Here.
Mr. Speaker, earlier laid before this Honorable House the Bermuda Housing Trust audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending 2020, which indicate that the trust remains in a strong financial position. Mr. Speaker, the BHT manages 5 properties, or close to 200 units. All of these properties are aging, with some dating as far back as the late 1960s. As with any aged facility, the maintenance demands and associated costs continue to increase. Notwithstanding, the BHT has remained committed to the upkeep of these buildings to ensure they can be occupied safely by our seniors. Mr. Speaker, the trustees are also mindful that the BHT carries an outstanding loan balance with HSBC, which is just over $5 million. The trustees are trying earnestly to discharge this loan by not only ensuring the monthly payments on that, but by applying annual payments on the principal, with last year seeing the sum of $250,000 going towards that debt. Mr. Speaker, the original capital loan to the BHT was for a sum of $12.5 million some 15 years ago. These funds were borrowed to advance the construction of the Dr. Cam Park facility in Southampton, which houses close to 100 seniors. Mr. Speaker, in the 2020 speech from the throne, the government committed to caring for seniors and helping them to age with dignity. The speech also highlighted the fact that data demonstrated the demographic trend towards living longer, with increasing numbers of citizens proudly wearing the title senior. The knock-on effect of the increase in the seniors population is the increased demand for homes for this cohort that want to live independently. The BHT's mission, mandated by statute, remains consistent, and that is to provide homes for seniors that afford them the freedom to live independently, and making these units available by charging the most affordable rents possible. And incidentally, Mr. Speaker, the BHT continues with its policy of not raising rents on sitting tenants, notwithstanding the continuing need for maintenance and rising costs. Mr. Speaker, at the start of the last financial year, the BHT embarked on an ambitious renovation and conversion project at the Old Navy Home at Ferguson Park in St. David's, with the goal of adding 2 additional units to its housing stock. Now, 2 additional units may not seem earth-shattering, especially when there is a consistent waiting list of 50 seniors, but it was an important project for other reasons. Mr. Speaker, this project was the fruit of a partnership with the Ministry of Public Works that was designed to serve as the template for future building projects the BHT would like to undertake. The ministry provided much-needed services at no cost by making available to the BHT one of its architects from the Bermuda Housing Corporation, Mr. Ferbert Jacobs, who supervised the project from inception through tendering and then the supervision of the project to completion. Completion occurred in August of 2020 when Westcott Cottage was officially opened by the Premier, the Minister of Public Works, and BHT's oldest resident at Ferguson Park, none other than Mr. Brando Pace, who is 104 years old. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the building project was delayed when COVID-19 struck and work had to be stopped for a period of time. While there were 2 unexpected change orders, mostly on account of what was found at the home during construction, the project was completed within budget. So at this point, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Stephen Daniels of Daniels Construction for the first-class work done at Ferguson Park. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 also impacted what the BHT was able to do in terms of its own operation and maintenance of other properties. Members will recall the lockdowns and health regulations that limited close contacts and mandated social distancing. Maintenance was therefore limited to emergencies only, or where units became vacant and contractors could go about their work without impacting any resident seniors. The BHD fully anticipates that maintenance will resume as COVID-19 restrictions ease, and this should impact the bottom line in the current and subsequent financial years as the BHD attempts to get its maintenance and repairs back on schedule. Meanwhile, the trustees are aiming to employ the public partnership model that was used for Westcott Cottage as an example of what can be done in the development of another property for seniors. This template is also key, and the BHD believes appealing to donors who are engaged to assist the seniors. Important partners all coming together to help advance the quality of life for seniors by the provision of accommodation at the most favorable rates available. And for those wishing to know more about the BHT or donate towards any development of the properties, they can visit the BHT website at www.housingtrust.bm or call the office at 292-1322. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to join the trustees of the BHT recently at their annual retreat. They reviewed a comprehensive agenda of their mission, future roles, and the exit conference points from the most recent audit. What is clear to me is the level of commitment demonstrated by the trustees. It was this level of energy and enthusiasm by the trustees that makes me proud to be the minister, and therefore even more proud to reassure them of the government's commitment wherever it can to provide all the support we can in terms of services to help the trust meet its goals. I'd also like to make special mention of the chairman of the BHT, the Honorable John Barrett, JP, and the deputy chairman, my colleague in this honorable chamber, Mr. Vance Campbell, JP-MP, and the board of trustees for their tireless work at the BHT. Mr. Speaker, there is so much that goes on behind the scenes that the average person is completely unaware of, and this, for the most part, becomes a thankless job. Therefore, I want to personally say thank you to both gentlemen and the trustees for all they give back to the seniors community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The last statement we have on the order this morning is in the name of the Minister of Education. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We're waiting for your camera. There we go. It's for you as well this morning. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I rise to provide my honorable colleagues with an update on the Ministry of Education's consultation process for the proposal to introduce parish primary schools. There have been comments in the public domain recently that have not represented our proposed education reform's true nature. I hope to clarify what has been happening with this statement. Mr. Speaker, first, let me cast my honorable colleagues' minds back to December 2020 when I provided an update on education reform. At that time, I shared 4 education domains that were either in train or about to start. These were 1, the development of an education authority. 2, the implementation of the Learning First program. 3, the phasing out of middle schools and the introduction of signature schools. And 4, the consultative process on the introduction of parish primary schools. Mr. Speaker, much progress has been made on the research and work needed to implement the recommendations for an education authority fully. I am most pleased with the focused efforts of the committee, who have been charged with developing options that can be considered for governing the transformed public school system. I expect a report outlining these from the committee in April. Mr. Speaker, the Learning First program commenced their work in October 2020, and the design team members have regrouped since the Christmas break. You will recall that in December, I reported that the team of 54 members consisted of 16 teachers and educators, education support staff, i.e. paraeducators and allied professionals, 12 community or cultural members from non-for-profit community leaders and school board members, 3 school leaders, principals, deputy principals, and teacher mentors, 9 members with education system experience, curriculum, education, and policy officers, 6 parents or family members, and 2 industry business partners from the private sector, all of whom brought with them a diversity of knowledge, skills, and technical abilities. Mr. Speaker, the team has been working on identifying national and core educational priorities, understanding design thinking, and delivering better learner outcomes. The work's overall objective is to prepare support for the delivery of new learning experiences for our students. The design team has now identified 6 national and core educational priorities that sit at the heart of the public school system's transformation journey. These include principles and values to guide decisions about what great learning looks like, pedagogical framework that will design teaching and learning to engage, challenge, and inspire our young people, curriculum framework to design what a vibrant 21st century curriculum that will give our young people the knowledge, skills, and value they need to succeed, graduate outcomes for designing new ways to recognize and certify learning for a range of college and career opportunities, education workforce strategy for designing high-level professional learning and development that teachers and school leaders need to shape the next generation, learning environments, designing diverse, engaging on and offline learning spaces to shape where, when, and how our young people learn in the future. The design team is currently engaged in a series of evening workshop sessions during the next 2 weeks. They will concentrate on each of these 6 national priorities to develop prototypes for new learning experiences. Those prototypes will then be tested among varied stakeholder groups in the broader community. The intent is for our children and teachers to engage in learning of excellence. Mr. Speaker, the work also continues with the phasing out of middle schools and the introduction of signature schools. The ministry team has been diligently working with chambers to ensure legislation is drafted to achieve this. Amendments to the Education Act will shift the education system from a 3-tier to a 2-tier system. As shared previously, the legislation will amend the age range for primary school education to 12 years, which includes the current M1 and M2 years, introduce senior level signature school education, and amend the start at 13 years to include the M3 years. The new legislation will also establish exceptionalities and alternative education for students. That bill will be tabled during this session of the legislature. Mr. Speaker, at this time I will dive into greater depth to provide an update on the proposal consultation process for the introduction of parish primary schools. The consultation document, which outlines the vision and plans for transforming public education, was released to the general public during mid-December for their reading and understanding. It invites critical stakeholders and community participation in a consultation on a proposal to introduce parish primary schools, including primary schools recommended for closure. In essence, the proposal is to reduce the number of primary schools from 18 to 10, recommending 1 primary school per parish, except Pembroke, which will have 2 primary schools. In part of the consultative process involving stakeholder meetings commenced earlier this year in January. Mr. Speaker, let me start with an overview of the consultation, which began with internal stakeholders. The ministry held consultation meetings with ministry and department staff, board members, representatives from all 3 unions, principals, and preschool administrators. These meetings were first to be held during January. During the first weeks in February, the consultation meetings continued with 2 public meetings. The general public was invited to attend, hear the proposed parish primary school presentation, ask questions, and give their input and suggestions. Mr. Speaker, the ministry has also held a total of 8 parish meetings for stakeholders who live in their respective parishes that could potentially be affected by the proposal. 2 meetings were held for the St. George's Parish stakeholders and education advocates, 2 for Smith's Parish, 2 for Devonshire, and 2 for Pembroke Parish residents. All consultation meetings were undertaken using the virtual platform Zoom. Participants registered for the meeting, they are interested in attending, and can submit questions in advance. Mr. Speaker, all consultative meetings held on Mondays and Thursdays are also broadcast on the government's CITV and streamed to the Bermuda government's Facebook and YouTube channels. The ministry aims to have as wide a reach as possible to the Bermudian community. The YouTube and Facebook streams are monitored, and any questions posted there are recorded. Additionally, these questions, as much as possible, are answered during the Zoom meeting. Mr. Speaker, consultation meetings structures comprise a presentation sharing information of data, 2 question and answer segments, and the administering of 2 polls. The presentation also provides all participants with an overview of why the need to transform the Bermuda public school system. It paints a clear picture of the vision for 21st century learning, highlighting visuals of what 21st century learning environment could look like for our children. Mr. Speaker, participants in the meeting receive a detailed account of study factors considered that forms the basis for determining what school location building sites to propose for each parish. The proposed primary schools per parish are shown by school zone. An explanation of the scoring is shared. During the parish consultation meetings, the presentation goes into further depth, explaining the scoring for all parish schools in that respective parish. Participants are given ample opportunity to engage, ask questions, and provide input and suggestions on the proposal. Mr. Speaker, the ministry collects each and every consultation submission and takes all responses and information shared during these meetings. Every meeting is also recorded. In fact, we have established a Mentimeter for documenting all questions and comments received. This database of information will be considered in the final decision-making process. I personally receive a weekly update of consultation submissions to receive and read each and every one as the consultation meetings progress. I've also found it very enlightening by participating in each of the meetings and hearing directly from the participants. This has helped me understand the thoughts and positions of parents and education advocates, staff, and the general public regarding the proposal for parish primary schools, and to hear from them directly. Mr. Speaker, to date, the ministry has received a total of 65 written submissions via the consultation link. The majority of the responses have been from parents or extended family members. This is good. We encourage everyone to complete a consultation form and share their ideas, any alternative proposals or suggestions. The transformation of the public school system is of national importance. Therefore, the ministry needs everyone to contribute so that the best decision is made for our children today and future generations. Mr. Speaker, during the consultation meeting thus far, a number of recurring themes have emerged. There is a common thread indeed. Participants have asked about the implementation timeline for the introduction of parish primary schools and potential closures. Mr. Speaker, I would like to reiterate that a decision has not been made on primary school closures. We have presented a proposal on the introduction of parish primary schools to start a national discussion. Therefore, at this point, a specific timeline for implementation cannot be provided. We intend to give careful consideration of every submission and feedback so that an informed decision is made. Mr. Speaker, the ministry is often asked why are high-performing schools being proposed for closure. Stakeholders must know that the ministry is consulting broadly to obtain as much feedback and input as possible. A powerful vision for learning has been proposed, and that vision cannot be achieved with the school buildings of the past, nor the teaching and learning styles of the past. Thus, careful thought went into determining the school building sites recommended for parish primary school locations. It's critical that these sites have the potential for expansion and development to support the new vision of learning. It would not be fair nor prudent to propose a school building site based on the performance when there are other social and economic factors that impact a child's school performance. We must have a system that caters to all of our students and their needs. It is important for us to meet them where they are. Mr. Speaker, during every meeting, stakeholders have asked, where is the funding coming from for possible refurbishment, renovations, and or building of primary schools? I must emphasize that the government is fully committed to funding education reform and transforming the Bermuda public school system. Additionally, the ministry has looked into various funding options, including public-private partnerships that have demonstrated proven financial support for big-ticket building facilities and projects. We want to assure our stakeholders that the funding will be provided. More importantly right now is to develop a blueprint of what our primary schools will look like. This blueprint will then be assessed for costs, timelines, and rollout, and given the resources needed. Mr. Speaker, another question centers around the potential of overcrowding of school buildings and classrooms. If the consultation's outcome is to have parish primary schools, those schools selected will be refurbished or rebuilt to accommodate up to 300 students. The ministry is proposing a maximum class size in primary schools of 15 students. The school enrollment projections also show steady declining student enrollment of each parish up to the year 2027. The school enrollment projections support a decision of 300 students per school with a maximum of 15 students per class. Therefore, overcrowding would not be an issue. Mr. Speaker, there is a fear that closing particular schools will eradicate the school's history or legacy. Mr. Speaker, history or legacy is carried on by people and what they do with information, knowledge, and past experiences. Therefore, there are many ways to preserve the legacy of experiences attached to school buildings. Examples could be renaming school buildings or classrooms, writing the history in the school curriculum, or establishing a History Hall of Fame. This has been done in the past and can continue. Mr. Speaker, the consultation meetings have been engaging overall. Participants have indicated through polls that they have been given ample opportunity to ask their questions and share, and this is what we want to achieve. The consultation process will continue during the next 2 weeks as the ministry holds specific meetings for Paget, Southampton, and Sands parishes. On March 8th, there will be one last public meeting for anyone interested in improving public education to attend. The consultation process will conclude on March 12th. Following this deadline, technical officers will be busy gathering all the data and feedback, collating the responses, and preparing a detailed analysis in report form that will be shared with the public. I intend to communicate the final decision before the end of this school year. Mr. Speaker, let me close by first thanking the dedicated and committed officers in the Ministry and Department of Education. They have sacrificed their family and personal time during the past few weeks, each night, to host the consultation meetings. We have a strong team that only wants to do what is best for children and position them for success. I also want to encourage my honorable colleagues and the general public to get involved. Mr. Speaker, if education fails, Bermuda fails. We need to be on the same page, the government, the opposition, and the public. Public education is of national importance. We need your feedback, and we need to hear from you. I urge members here and the public to register to attend one of the remaining consultation meetings to learn about the proposal to introduce parish primary schools. Take some time to read the consultation submission form by visiting www.moed.bm website. Let's make this national effort to transform our public school education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. That brings us to a close of the statements by ministers and junior ministers for this morning. Next on the order paper are reports of committees. There are none. We're now at the question period. Members, as you know, we have 60 minutes for this, and the time is now 10:59. And before we get to the questions from statements, there are two written sets of questions this morning. The first is for the Premier from MP Dunkley. MP Dunkley, would you like to put your questions now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to colleagues. The first question to the Honorable Premier. Will the Honorable Premier please inform this Honorable House which government ministers, including the Premier, have at any time since March 8, 2019, had either advisors or consultants as per the Ministerial Code of Conduct, and list the name of the advisor or consultant and the ministry to which she is attached?
Premier? Premier? Can someone inform the Premier that we need him to respond at this time, please?
If he's coming on now, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Premier, I was having an issue with my audio.
We've got all sorts of technical glitches this morning, but first day back, understood.
Sorry, my apologies. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the first question from the honorable member, the first answer is Minister of Public Works, Mrs. Trina Bean, advisor/political aide to the minister. In regards to the other ministers that fall under this, it would be myself, Premier, Mr. Gabriel Abed, Digital Technology Advisor to the Premier, and Dr. Karika Weldon, Scientific Advisor to the government of Bermuda. And also Mr. Dennis Pitcher, who serves as FinTech advisor to the government of Bermuda.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Is there a supplementary?
Second, supplementary, yes, just on the first question, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Honorable Premier for the answer. In regards to the advisor to the Minister of Public Works, what is the specific job responsibility and projects to be completed?
Advisor and political aid to the minister.
Thank you, Premier. Question
Second
number
question?
2. Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker. Will the Honorable Premier please provide this Honorable House the total remuneration and benefit package for each advisor or consultant listed?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to the question, the first is Ms. Trina Bean at $9,886 per month. Mr. Gabriel Abed in the role of Digital and Science and Technology Advisor to the Premier of Bermuda is unpaid. Dr. Krika Weldon in her role as Scientific Advisor to the Governor of Bermuda is unpaid, and Mr. Dennis Pitcher, in regards to FinTech Advisor, is $9,034.12 per month.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Are all these items funded? Are all these items funded in the current year budget?
I will answer and say yes.
Thank you, Premier. Question number 3.
Yes, continue.
As per the Premier's Minister and Opposition Leader's Personal Staff Accounts 2019, can the Honorable Premier please name all people hired or remaining as personal staff since the October 1st general election, listing job title, responsibility, and all benefits of each person hired?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member is invited to refer to the annual report from the Office of the Premier on the Premier, Ministers, and Opposition Leader and Personal Staff Act, tabled in this Honourable House on the 4th of December 2020. With reference to that report, no additional individuals have been hired during that period, which covered 2019, save for Mr. Joshe Adams, who commenced employment in support of the Minister of Finance on the 18th of May 2020 at $8,900 a month, and Ms. Serena Lindsay, hired in support of the Minister of Labor on September 1st, 2020 at $86,338.79 per annum. In regards to that report as well, Mr. Corey Butterfield is no longer engaged under the Act. All salaries for persons are noted as above and also in the 2019 report. However, in August 2020, all contracts were directed to reduce by 7% in solidarity with reductions taken across the legislature, public service, and Quango's 5% pension and 2% to account for social insurance. All benefits are provided as per the Act, and with regards to hires since 2020 general election, no additional persons have been hired as personal staff since the 2020 general election.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Supplementary?
Supplementary, yes.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to the 2 individuals that have been hired since the election.
Sorry, no one's been hired since the election.
Yes, sorry, the 2 individuals that were hired, I didn't catch the second name, but I had the first name as MP Adams, the second name, Honorable Premier, can you repeat that before I provide the supplementary?
Ms. Serena Lindsay.
Okay, thank you. What are the length of contract of those 2 individuals?
Sorry, I do not have that information in front of me.
Supplemental, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Premier, I understand that there is a Jordan Scott in your office. Can you tell us what he does on your behalf?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Jordan Scott is hired as he came on to in assistant to Chief of Staff, and I believe he started in January 2021.
Thank you.
Okay, no further supplement?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. The two individuals listed, what are their specific job responsibility roles?
And the two new hires in 2020.
Correct, Mr. Speaker.
As I had indicated in the answer which I've given, they are personal staff. Mr. Shea Adams commenced employment in support of the Minister of Finance, and Ms. Zarina Lindsay was hired in support of the Minister of Labor.
Thank you, Honorable Premier, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The next question this morning are also questions. They were for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, I believe you've, Mr. Speaker, supplementary. He was having a problem. That's from former Premier Craig Canada.
Sorry about it, Mr. Speaker, my mic is not working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
He said yes?
Yes.
Go ahead. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to supplement.
Hold on one second. Let me get it clear. The MP Canada was trying to get a question in.
Yes. He was having a problem with his speaker.
Minister to the Premier?
Yes, it's to the Premier.
To the Premier. Okay, put your question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just curious, why was Jordan Scott's name not included in the initial listing when you read out the answers to the question?
Happy to answer that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've answered the questions as was stated in regard to the dates in which the questions were submitted. But I'm happy to acknowledge that was not listed on my sheet here. And an error was that Mr. Jordan Scott has been hired inside my office, and I will provide his remuneration before the question period is finished.
Thank you. No further supplementaries. No further supplementary?
No, thank you.
We move on to questions to Minister Wilson. Minister, was I correct in indicating that you were acting that we carried this one?
That's correct, Minister. Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 18.4, I would like to defer the responses to these parliamentary questions.
Okay, can we expect to have next week?
Mr. Speaker, you would see that one of the particular questions does require quite a lot of research with respect to the compensation details of those persons that have been retained to do testing and vaccinations. So we will provide that information at the earliest possibility.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to the questions this morning in reference to statements that were given today.
Mr. Speaker, if I may.
Yes?
I'm sorry, I've just been supplied with the answers, and I will make sure to amend the item which I gave and send my apologies. Mr. Jordan Scott Furtado in my office to replace who was here for a while, Ms. Nina Selassie, and it is $7,875 per month. $7,875 per month.
Thank you. Is there a supplement? No, we've moved on, but okay. Members, just as that we would normally give an indication in the chat, members who may have a question for any statements this morning. And thus far, there is only one question this morning, and that is from MP Cannonier to, actually there are two questions, all right? One from MP Cannonier to the Minister of Education. MP Cannonier, would you like to put your question?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, can you hear me? I'm trying to get my visual up.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, the camera's not coming up. Okay, yes, on page, 3, the minister mentioned that
Mr. Speaker, I cannot hear the member. Mr. Speaker, I cannot hear the member at all.
Give us development training, the school's teachers,
Mr. Speaker, I cannot hear the question.
this new vision. Can he elaborate?
Mr. Speaker, I cannot hear the question.
I think Mr. Speaker has frozen too. His screen is on my side.
MP Kennedy, I'm going to ask that you fill out your technical. I'm going to go to the second question. I'll come back to you. The second question is actually from the opposition whip, and that's to the Minister Hayward. Minister Labor, opposition whip, would you like to put your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Honorable Minister please inform this Honorable House, as it relates to his ministerial statement, if he could clarify that the holder of the residential certificate will be granted automatic approval to work in the business to which he or she may have invested, or to work in any other business? Is this unlimited permission to work in Bermuda?
No, Mr. Speaker, the person, if they have invested in the business, they get automatic approval to work in the business in which they have invested. However, if they want to work outside of that business, they will be subject to the government policy.
Thank you.
Supplementary?
Yes, I do have a supplementary, just because the statement says to work in any other business. The residential certificate holder desires to work in Bermuda. It says that the spouse of the dependent wants to seek work, they require a work permit. But it says that the holder of the actual certificate will be allowed to work in any other business. So my supplementary is the statement in error, or is the policy different from the statement?
I believe the way in which you're interpreting if it was written in, and it would be the ability to automatically work in the business that the individual actually invested in, and another business. Because it says or, it just gives the ability to permission to start and seek employment and work in other businesses, but that person will be subject to work permit control.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Minister. I have a second question in relation to the statement. I note, would the Honorable Minister please clarify who will be the determining authority for accepting the investment? Mr. Speaker, the statement says that the economic investment certificate applicant can make a minimum investment in Bermuda in any one or more of the following ways, but those are not exclusive. So it's clear that it's envisioned there will be alternatives or additional ways of making investment into Bermuda. Who will determine that the alternative investment was sufficient to meet the eligibility criteria?
The Department of Immigration. The minister will be ultimately the one that approves the certificates, and the minister has to be satisfied that there is evidence that the sufficient investment has been made in the community economy. And so we have a process where we ask those individuals to go through the government concierge service, so that all the documents required to do the vetting are put in place prior to the finding on whether or not that person shall be granted a certificate.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, supplemental to that.
Supplementary, go ahead.
Would the will the minister or the Department of Immigration consider a political investment or an investment in a political organization in Bermuda to be criteria for eligibility for economic investment certificate?
No, I don't believe that our investment into a political party constitutes investment according to this particular certificate.
To another school, all this is social and that.
Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, third question.
Third question, yes.
And, yes, Mr. Speaker, I note that that the economic, if the Honourable Minister could inform this Honourable House in relation to his ministerial statement, that the economic investment certificate will require a person to make $2.5 million investment in Bermuda in those categories he's previously discussed. At that point, what right do they have? Because the ministerial statement then says, following on from the investment, and then it picks up in the chain of thought or in the chain of events that if at or after 5 years. So within that 5-year period, after they've made the investment, 2.5 million, what do they have the right to do within that 5-year period before they can apply for the residential certificate?
So the way in which Mr. Speaker, the way in which the economic investment certificate and residential certificate is actually structured would be one would obtain an economic investment certificate, which is a 5-year certificate, and they have to maintain their investment over that period of time. During that period of time, the person will have rights to work in a business that they have operated in. They also have the ability to work according to our current work permit policy. If the person decides that they want to remain in Bermuda for an indefinite period under the residential portion, what they would have to do was satisfy that they met the 5-year criteria for the economic investment certificate, and that provides a gateway for that person to obtain a residential certificate. Once that person obtains a residential certificate, they have the current rights which are laid out for residential certificate holders. The difference being the person would have the ability to reside and seek employment under our current work permit policy.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, please, sir.
Yes, Mr. Supplementary?
My supplementary question is, as it relates to substantial sums being invested into Bermuda, and the criteria appears dependent on decision makers that we in the House don't have a regular interface with. We won't regularly see this approval process, but we are talking about very large sums of money for these rights in Bermuda. How will the minister, or will the minister be reporting back to the House in the success of this program, and when could we expect such reports?
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I'll certainly endeavor to provide updates on the success of the program, similar to which updates the Ministry of Labor has been given for the 1-year work from Bermuda certificate policy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honourable Minister. That's all of my supplementaries and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. MP Canada, we see your video sorted out. How's your audio? Is it good to your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We can hear you well. You can put your question on, and I think your question was to the Minister of Education.
Appreciate it, Mr. Speaker. On page 3 of the Education Minister, the Honourable Member's statement, at the very top, he mentions education workforce strategy and for designing high-level functional learning for school leaders to shaping the next generation. And I was hoping that the Minister could help me in understanding a bit more about the professional development and career progression that he has in mind, and how it's taking shape. What are they doing right now about that, including assisting with financial issues? Can he elaborate on that?
Thank you. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, honorable member, for that. Honorable member, what that, the part you're referring to, the education workforce strategy, is part of the Learning First program. The Learning First program is a team that has been designed to look at learning as it occurs now. What we want learning to be, what it should be, look at what processes our educators are using now to design what the future of our system should look like from a learning perspective and from a curriculum perspective. Of course, there will have to be a requirement for professional development to be provided to our educators and our leaders within our system in order for them to bring forth this new educational system. So as that is developed and the professional development is identified, the ministry and the government has committed to ensuring that we provide every and all opportunities for our current educators to gain those skill sets so they can be a part of the system.
Supplementary. Mr. Speaker?
Yes, you can do your supplementary.
Yeah, okay. That was a bit general, but I guess the next question I would ask is, this professional development, has it been identified and where this professional development will come from? Would it be a U.S. system, British system? Have we ever gotten that far yet?
As I stated in the statement, and as I've stated in the public domain, the Learning First are currently beginning to engage in prototyping of what the system could look like. The idea is that we have a system designed by Bermudians for Bermuda, not a system that is imported wholeheartedly from somewhere else. Of course, we will use best practices that are seen in other countries, but it's very important for us to have a system that is by Bermudians for Bermudians. So once that system has designed, and I understand the impatience, because we are moving we're moving very methodically and very deliberate through this, because we have to get it right the first time. We will take as long as we need to make sure that we get this right. But in terms of professional development for our teachers, that still continues. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we had intense professional development for our teachers during the midterm break. Prior to the beginning of school, we had intensive professional development on remote learning, the use of platforms such as Schoology that we have introduced to our system. So the professional development continues, but this particular thing that we're talking about here from the Learning First is they are in the process of gathering the data that they need now to talk about what it is that our system will look like in the future, and then professional development will be designed around what those needs are.
Thank you, Mr. Honorable Member. Second question?
Yes, do your second question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 6, the third paragraph down, this has become an ongoing question, and I'm glad that the honorable member has addressed it in this paragraph of talking about high-performance schools being proposed for closure. So there's a lot of talk around that, but further on down in the paragraph there, it says it would not be fair nor prudent to propose school building sites based on performance when there are many other social and economic factors. And taking into consideration, some of these schools are stone's throw away from each other, where one is kept and one is not going to be held on to. I guess what I'm trying to understand is if we're moving kids from a high performance school, not also propose social and economic factors that might affect the performance of these students, because the school's high performance is based on students doing well. So I'm just trying to understand a little more about that part. It's kind of contradictory because you don't need fancy schools necessarily to have high performance. So I'm just hoping that he can help us out here a little.
Thank you. I think I'm going to respond. I'm not quite sure what exactly you're trying to say, but I will attempt to put this in perspective. High-performing schools are not dependent on the building. They're depending on the learning that happens within the building. And if a system or whatever is happening is working within a building, we are committed to looking at what is happening within that building and using that as part of our education reform. So if we do have a quote unquote high performance school, it is not necessarily a result of the actual building that exists. And so when we look at our system, we're looking at a system that has to give every single one of our students the opportunity to succeed, and we have to meet them where they are. And so with the system that we are proposing, all of the resources to ensure that all of our students succeed will be consolidated into one building, and then that building can become, I guess, as you want to refer to it, high performance. But all of our students will be high performing, not just a segment of our society.
Thank you. Thank you. Minister, thank you. While we have the minister, there's a question for you as well. And the next question after that would be for Mr. Jackson. Would you like to put your question out?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Minister. My question is around the spend. I'm just curious if you could provide the House with the estimated amount of money that has been spent so far on the consultation period and the innovation unit, and just the total cost of spend this year.
I can commit to bring that back. As the innovation unit contract, which was which in the public domain and was discussed in this very place last year when we did hire them in March.
Yes.
It's a commitment over the course of around 3 years, and I believe it's $2.1 million over the course of 3 years. But there are other expenses that would have to be tallied if we're looking at if you want to know the total cost of reform, because the local persons on Learning First are being provided with a stipend because they're doing an awful lot of work. And there are some other things when we organize our meetings. There is, when we organize our meetings prior to COVID, we did have to furnish snacks and such. So if you want a total amount, or if you're only concentrating on innovation unit, that contract is currently in the public domain and can be easily accessible for yourself.
Yes, I am aware of that, and thank you. And thank you very much for providing.
Supplementary?
No, I have nothing else. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Minister, there's any questions for you? The last set of questions today is for the Minister of Health from MP Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Honorable Minister of Health.
Yes.
Minister of Health, on page 5 of your statement, you state, to be clear, Mr. Speaker, the purpose is not to control the price of every medication sold in Bermuda. And the last part of that paragraph goes, medication which are intended to be medically appropriate, cost-effective, and sold at a regulated price. The question to you, Honorable Minister, is how will that regulated price be arrived at? What basis, what guidelines will the government provide the Health Council and this authority in their deliberations?
Mr. Speaker, with respect to that, and more details obviously will come out of this when we debate the bill in 2 weeks hence, but the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee will actually be charged with helping to assess what drugs will, as well as medical types of medical equipment will form part of the drug formulary, and then there will be obviously regulations that will come for this, but there will be a number of factors that will go into this, and particularly the actual cost of the drug, the cost of importation, etc. And I think of importance as to note that these will not be, the formulary will not include every single drug known to man. It will be the most common drugs that are utilized here in Bermuda based on the information that the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, obtain from the requisite sources such as pharmacists, physicians, pharmaceutical regional reps, etc.
I appreciate and understand that. A supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, in this statement, and it appears that government will get involved in negotiating with overseas suppliers for the importation of drugs if need be. Does the minister believe that in the longer term that government will directly bring in medications and drugs themselves for provision to locals who require them?
I appreciate the honorable member's question. Actually, as the speech speaks to, it will be the Health Council that will assist with respect to, or that will have power to assist in negotiating pharmaceutical costs that are imported into the island. Obviously, we may have economies of scale, and they may be better placed to negotiate such prices for these pharmacies. So at this point, it is envisioned that it will be, well, as the legislation will say, which we'll table soon, it will be the Health Council that will be charged with negotiating with pharmaceutical companies to allow for best pricing concerning the drugs that will be made available, in Bermuda.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I understand that the Health Council takes direction from the government. So let me be more specific.
Is this, yeah, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I can make it a supplementary. I will be happy to, Mr. Speaker. So in this regard, does the minister envision that the Health Council will import drugs directly to assure that the lowest possible price is provided to the public?
As is envisioned, Mr. Speaker, the council may partner with a local pharmacy or importer to assist in securing the best possible drug prices for Bermuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further supplementary or second question?
No, thank you. I am completed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, members. That brings us to the end of the question period this morning. And we now move on.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Hold on one sec. There's a clarification that was required on one of the comments I made. Premier, would you like to provide a clarification?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, as we had the questions, I did offer my apologies as the time between the time the questions were submitted and et cetera. So some answers were ready and some were not. So I apologize for that omission, and I've clarified that. Mr. Speaker, as I know that political items, that these things can become political in nature, I just wanted to make sure that honorable members, especially the honorable member who asked the question, that it should be noted that I have directed the annual remuneration of contracts for personal staff who became members of the legislature following the 2020 general election to be reduced by 50% of their annual legislative salary. So I just wanted that to be noted, and that was communicated in late last year.
Thank you. Okay. We'll now move on. The next item on the order paper is that of the congratulatory and obituary speeches. Would any member wish to speak to that?
Mr.
Any member wish to speak?
Mr. Speaker?
Yes, sounds like Minister Birch.
Yeah, Ashley, yes.
You have your 3 minutes.
Okay, I don't think I'll need them. I wish to have condolences extended to the family of Miss Joanne Rayner, who was funeralized this week. She was a personal friend of mine, but she also worked for 12 years in the Department of Tourism office in New York and lived in New York subsequent to that. Anybody who knew Joanne, the first thought that comes to mind was laughter. She had a personality that was designed for tourism, I think, and thus the success she had representing Bermuda in the New York office. I'd ask that condolences be sent to her 2 sons, Omar and Ashley. Right out of my head, Mr. Speaker.
James Haddon.
Omar and Mika, and the grandchildren and the rest of the family. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak?
Mr. Speaker.
Premier?
Thank
Yes,
you.
you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with the condolences that were expressed to the family of Joanne Rayner from the Minister of Public Works just now, and I did attend the viewing to offer my condolences to the family. As Colonel said, she was a longtime employee of the Bermuda Tourism Authority or the Department of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, as leader of the Bermuda Progressive Labor Party in this honorable House, I wish to ask that the House do send condolences to the family of the late Sister Lebron Ferbert, JP, who served in the legislature in the other place. And I would like to associate all members of the House to send with these condolences, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure there'll be other tributes that we offer by members later today. Sister Lebron supported the Progressive Labor Party in countless ways over decades of service. She served as right hand to the former party leaders, Dame Lois Brown Evans and L. Frederick Wade, at his time as leader of the opposition, ran for the Progressive Labor Party in multiple general elections, and also in 2010 was appointed to the Senate by the then Premier, the Honorable Paula Cox, who served as Junior Minister of Education, Youth Affairs, and Community Development. We certainly know of her active time in the Progressive Labor Party during many different capacities, whether it be at branch level, whether it be at the national level, or at the executive level, and could always be counted for support and counsel in many times. Without question, she was a freedom fighter and forcefully stood up for persons who were able to stand up for themselves, and at never a point in time was she afraid of stating her views, her positions, and her convictions. After her time in serving in the opposition, of course, she went on to the Bermuda Industrial Union and served for a long time there, serving the presidents and the members and staff of Bermuda Industrial Union. No question, Mr. Speaker, it is an incredible loss. And I would like to, as I ask the House to send a letter, and of course we've made sure that her recognition tomorrow will be a recognition funeral, but on behalf of the government and the people of Bermuda, I want to extend our condolences to her sons, Vance and David, their wives, her grandchildren, her sister Maxine, her relatives and friends, her BIU family, and her Progressive Labor Party family. And we will forever remember our dear and departed Sister Lebron Ferbert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Does any other member wish to speak?
Mr. Speaker?
Yes? Is it? Okay, Mrs. Scott, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would just like to have the House send a congratulatory remarks to the Public Service Employee Wellness Committee, who hosts a step and activity challenge for all public officers through an act called Spring. The Government of Bermuda's challenge took place between October 5th, 2020 and January 8th, 2021. Out of 65 teams, the TCD, or the Transport Control Department, won with 14,989,522 steps. Mr. Speaker, so can we send a letter of congratulations to the TCD team of Yolanda Johnson, Vernon Tucker, Raymond Dean, Suzanne Smith, Deborah Ann Tucker, Charles Clark, Lisa Smith, Claire Williams, Terry Spencer, and Lavette Ford. So if a letter of congratulations can be sent to the TCD team, which won the Moon Spring Challenge, that would be most appreciated.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to speak?
Yes, I do. MP Simmons Wade.
MP Simmons, you have your 3 minutes.
I'd like to give my condolences to the family of the late Thelma Robinson, mother of Dolores, Deborah, and Doreen Robinson from Paget. I would also like to give my condolences to the family of the late Cicely Seaman from Pembroke. She was 100 years old earlier this year. She was the mother of Charlene and Dawn. And I want to say both these ladies are examples of women who live their lives to the fullest and who aged well, a perfect example for our young people and our older people to take care of themselves so that they too may make 100 years old. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Anthony Simmons, Deputy Opposition Leader, like to make a contribution?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the opposition, I'd like to associate myself with the comments made in regards to former Senator Lebron Ferbert. As we all know, she was a champion for the rights of labor and the labor movement. She was a fighter with passion. She was fearless. If she had you in her sights, you were in trouble. So I'd like to send condolences to her entire family, her sons Vance and David, her grandsons, and her sister Maxine. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also send condolences out to the family of James Smith. Mr. Speaker, as you know, James Smith was a former clerk to the House of Assembly. He was a history professor at Bermuda College, and he was an honorary fellow of Bermuda College. He had a passion for writing. He wrote about Black inequality and slavery in Bermuda. He was a born Bermudian. In addition, he was an avid sportsman. He was a tennis player at Belmont, and he was a coach for the Bermuda Triangle Swimming Club. This gentleman was a real Bermudian and crossed many racial barriers. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also send condolences out to the family of the late Alan Foopsie Burroughs, a former family friend. I'd like to also send condolences out to Hadley Lionel Woolridge. He was one of Bermuda's tourism ambassadors. He's survived by his son Lionel and Benoni and his sister Una Mae Bean. He was a founding member of Fathers Unite, the charity that did work for fathers in Smith Parish, and he also did a lot of work, charitable work for Summer Haven. He was one of the patriarchs of Smith Parish and a member of the Smith Parish Woolwich family. I mean, he was well known, he was well liked and well respected. So I'd like to send condolences to his family as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Opposition Leader. Does any other member wish to make a contribution?
Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, sorry.
Is that Deputy Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to be associated with the remarks concerning the former Senator Lebron Ferbert, who was a very dear personal friend of mine. And Speaker, Mr. Ferbert, Lebron was a true freedom fighter, one of integrity and commitment, Mr. Speaker. She will surely be missed around in Union Square, missed by the whole family on Union Square. Speaker, it's a big loss to us, Mr. Speaker, and I pray for her sons, Vance and Dr. David, and Sister Maxine, and the rest of the family. Also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to send condolences out to the family of Mr. Raymond Asford, who was funeralized some weeks ago. He leaves his wife, Miss Lynette Asford, and some children. Also, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Charlie Simmons, who passed some weeks ago. He also leaves his daughters, Angela, Shalita, and son, Robert. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to send condolences out to the family of Miss Betty Otterbridge, who leaves some children, Hubert, Gerald, Glenn, Shane, Donna, I think it's one more, and Miss Wendy Truck from Harris's Bay, the daughter of Susan Simons Truck, Mr. Speaker, and also like to be associated with the remarks concerning Mr. Hadley Woolwich. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Any other member like to speak? I see the member from 28.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning.
Good morning.
To my honorable colleagues and to the listening audience. Mr. Speaker, I just want to send obituaries to the family of Mrs. Ali of Sun Valley, a constituent of mine, and she passed since we last sat in this house. also to another constituent of mine who is well known, the former financial secretary, Mr. Anthony Mendes, also like to send condolences to his family. And Mr. Speaker, while it's always sad to lose anybody, it is more heartening to lose people, a young person in the prime of their life. And I would like to send condolences out to the family of Miss Calvina Santucci. She was a former, we were in the same class, but she was a few years behind me. So I've known her all throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. And it's very sad to hear of her passing this week. So I would like to send condolences out to her family.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with that as well, please, Ms. Santucci.
Opposition leader?
I'd just like to be associated with that.
Okay, and also, Mr. Speaker, also to the families, I have mentioned the names prior in press statements, but to the families of the road victims for this year, Mr. Clevante Lodge and Mr. Ronde Wilson, also like to send condolences to their families, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member wish to speak?
Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker?
Is someone there with Minister Scott? I see a hand, I just can't catch your voice.
It's Terrell, MP Terrell.
MP Terrell, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I would appreciate if the House could send a letter of condolences to the family of the late John Edmund White from Rockland's estate. Mr. White's family were the first family that welcomed me into Rockland's 40 years ago. So we became quite friendly. We would talk across the fence quite often. And he will be missed in the neighborhood because he was certainly the person who looked after cars. He worked on his car almost every day. We liked new gadgets and things. In fact, I will miss hearing his car coming into the yard because he had a voice notification on his backup which says, "This car is backing up." So I will always miss that. And I hope that his family find counsel during their time of bereavement. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Terrell. Is there any other member?
Mr. Speaker?
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker?
I hear MP Jackson. Is that you, MP Jackson?
Yes, please.
You have your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. I would very much like to be associated with the condolences to the former Senator Laverne Ferbert. I did not know her in a political capacity, but I did know her as a supportive mother. And I just admired her. She was, for me, a role model as a supportive mother, while her son David was authoring, publishing, and distributing free to school children his Daddy and I children's book series. And I certainly was able to engage in a number of conversations with the former senator during that period of time. David must have published about a half a dozen of the Daddy and I book series, and she was always so supportive. She was so consistent and very much engaged, and certainly as a mother, I admired her. I'd also like to send out condolences to a constituent, Richard Butts. He lost his life at the end of last year, and he was certainly an active participant within the constituency, in that I remember him being one of my tougher, tougher constituents when I first came into politics, and have developed a relationship with he and his wife over the years. And I certainly send condolences to his wife, Antoinette, known as Tony, and the time that we spend together making sure that she remains healthy and supported in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, MP
Mr.
Jackson.
Speaker.
Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time?
Speaker.
Is that MP Swan? MP Swan, you have your 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to you.
We can hear you. Your audio is fine, but I don't have your video. Here we go.
Yes, there you go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to be associated with the condolences offered to the family of Sister Laverne Ferbert, who I've gotten to know rather well and have known from both sides of of the divide, and always had great respect and admiration. Because once a Death Valley girl, always a Death Valley girl. Even though you got relatives down in Flats, and you got a name that comes from coal, and she was a Death Valley girl, and we were always proud of that. May she rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with the condolences to former clerk, Mr. James Smith, who I knew as a tennis pro at Belmont back in the early 70s when I was starting off my career, and be associated with condolences to the Santucci family, of which I'm very closely connected with. I'd like for condolences to be sent, Mr. Speaker, to the family of Miss Muriel Brown from the Wellington Hill family. Many would know the Curtis family up there, closely associated with them. Her son Maxwell's daughter Muriel, deceased son, and her grandchildren Max and Makisha. We offer condolences, and to the Engelman and Charm family on the passing of Olaf Engelman. They are offer sincere condolences to them. Certainly, the family of my father's good friend and cricket buddy, Mr. Junius Durant, Mr. Speaker. Offer condolences. Only spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, getting some historical information. He will be sorely missed. The family of Mr. Tom Smith from the sport, from youth and sport, and also he was a past executive of the Bermuda Golf Association many years ago, Mr. Speaker, and also the family of Mr. Vernon Burns, his widow Peggy Burns. So we send our condolences out to them as well. And finally, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vincent Smith, who I played cricket with at Somerset Bridge. Smitty used to walk down there from down there by George's Bay across the field. And is he coming, or there he goes with the afro coming through down there on White Hill Field to play cricket with us, Mr. Speaker. May he rest in peace. And finally, Mr. Speaker, if anybody who did live in Somerset Bridge before GP Cars, there was Nurse Can driving that car through Hug Bay Level, who's passed on. May she rest in peace, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Swan. 2 voices. MP Famous. MP Famous.
Yeah, morning, Mr. Speaker.
You have your 3 minutes.
Yes, I want to share any condolences to Sister Laverne Ferbert. During the 4 years we were in opposition, she helped she was instrumental in teaching many of us the proper way to protest. And as we can see, our protests were effective. I want to give condolences to some Devonshire people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. John Ming of Jubilee Road, Ms. Shirley Tappy De Silva of Hermitage Road, Mr. Antonio De Frias of Collectors Hill, Ms. Viola Powell of Green Acres, and Mr. Earl Gabby Hart. I'm not sure if he was mentioned already, but Mr. Earl Gabby Hart of Green Acres as well. These were elders in the community who did a lot to help keep Devonshire people together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Famous.
Mr.
And the
Speaker.
other member would like to make a contribution.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
MP Dunkley, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to be associated with the condolences given to Mr. Hart, a former constituent of mine and now constituent of Mr. Famous, and to Mr. James Smith, who was at Parliament when I first arrived, and condolences to the family of Anthony Manders, who was a very professional civil servant who I enjoyed working with. He always had an answer, and he could always give you another answer if you weren't quite happy with the answer he gave you. He was not only professional, but he knew his job in and out, and he treated everyone fairly. And I was shocked to see him pass away, so condolences to his family. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure many people in the House would like to be associated with these condolences to a good friend of mine, Keith Pearman, who passed away about 10 days ago. I've known Keith for decades. As a young child, I first learned how to play golf with Gilbert Butch Linder and Keith Pierman down at the old National Sports Club where we'd hit balls. And I played many tournaments with Keith as a senior and junior. I was under the age of 18 at the time, and I played.
Associate me, Mr. Speaker.
Yes,
Honorable
Mr.
member.
Speaker. I have associated with many members of the House. Certainly, the Honorable Member Kim Swan knew him quite well. Politically, he was a big supporter of mine, Mr. Speaker. He canvassed with me for many, many years. He lived in MP Famous's constituency right now. And when I moved to Smith North, he continued to canvass in that area. Keith was excellent on the doorstep, but he had one weakness. He didn't like dogs, so that became a problem from time to time. He knew many people. He had many friends. He had very few enemies, Mr. Speaker, because he would always say, when the going got tough sometimes, it's best just to keep your dog tied up. He broke barriers in our community as a black man, especially in golf. Many people will know him as the head pro at Mid-Ocean, and he made countless friends from all over the world. Mr. Speaker, Keith will be sadly missed by his friends. He was a valued counsel to myself, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, he was a wonderful Bermudian, and we should never forget the values that he lived by. May he rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Is there
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
any other member?
Mr. Speaker.
No other member? Before we move on, I'd just like to.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker.
there's been members that are asked to speak.
And Minister Ming, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Yes. MP Ming? Yes, Mr.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to first of all associate myself with the condolences that have been given for former Senator Lebron Ferbert, Mr. Anthony Mandas, and also for Calvina Santucci. I'd also like to extend heartfelt prayers to the family of Earlif Ingerman, Ingy, well-known St. Georgian. Hello? Sorry. Well-known St. Georgian who passed away last week, and I just want his family to know that they're in our thoughts and prayers. And I'd also like to extend condolences to the family of Roderick Peterson, who passed in January, and also Mr. Vernell Burns. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to have one congratulatory mention, and that's for Miss Florence Maxwell, and that was on her recognition by U.S. media book guru Oprah Winfrey for her book that she has written with regard to young ladies. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Me with Ms. Maxwell as well, Mr. Speaker and Minister. Associate MP Swan.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
It sounds like another voice from the East End.
It is indeed.
MP Ferbert, you have the floor.
Today, I would only like to acknowledge one constituent who has indeed passed away, and therefore I must associate myself with the remarks coming from Minister Ming when she expressed condolences for Mr. Vernell Burns. He was a solid PLP supporter, an ardent worker in Branch 3, and he indeed was the husband to Ms. Peggy Burns. They worked closely with us in the East on everything, and so he will be missed, and my condolences go out to Peggy and her daughter Joanne and Dawn, and his son's name escapes me, but and his son as well. He will be greatly missed. Thank you.
Thank you. MP, does any other member wish to make a contribution?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. MP Richardson.
You have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to send our condolences to the family of Michael Whaley of Bostock Hill West, who, as a member of Christ Church, was very active in the church family and their activities, constantly volunteering to assist in all their functions and repairing all kinds of electrical issues. He was a very active elder and stalwart of that church family, and I'd like our condolences to be sent to him Further, Mr. Speaker, condolences to the family of Elsie L. Thorne, Nee Grays of Cameron Vale, who had a very quiet strength, a very gracious and strong lady, one of the founding members of Peace Lutheran Church, one of the elders of the church who brought a lot of Lutheranism or introduced Lutheranism to a lot of Bermudian families. Lost her husband at a relatively young age, and then went on to raise 5 children on her own, and now has a very wide and diverse family spread across the island. So condolences to the Thorns of Cameron Vale as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Opposition Whip. Does any other member wish to make a contribution?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
this is Minister Tanae Ferbert.
Minister, you have your 3 minutes.
Yes, good afternoon. I just want to be associated with the comments in regards to Sister Miss Ferbert, as well as Miss Betty Otterbridge of Hamilton Parish. Condolences to the families of both of those persons, as well as condolences to Miss Kim Hendrickson, who recently also passed. And just wanted
Please associate me also, Mr. Speaker, for Ms. Hendrickson. Please also associate.
Yes.
Yeah. All of these people will be extremely missed by our community, and just want to give condolences, and my condolences on behalf of constituency St. George's South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Is there any other member? Before we move on, Dan, I'd just like to acknowledge some of the condolences that have been given this morning, particularly for the fact that those who are associated with the legislature in the past, and I'd like to be associated with the former clerk, Mr. James Smith. He was a clerk when I came to this house many years ago, and he was always one who was extremely helpful and willing to go the extra mile to help in the procedure and processes of information that we needed. To Ms. Ferbert, who sat in the other chamber, and we have much has been said about her. We know the contribution and value that she brought to fighting for causes in this community. And also Mr. Mendes, Financial Secretary. We are all familiar with his presence in this chamber, particularly during the debate, budget debates and things of that nature. And we know he'd be a valuable miss to government for the service and to his family as well. And when we speak of clerks who served in here, I'd like to also acknowledge the fact that former clerk Mrs. Roach lost her husband during this period, and we'd like to acknowledge his loss. And on a constituency matter, let me be associated with the remarks that expressed to Nurse Can. And as was said, she was always very familiar figure moving around our community many years ago. And she was well valued in our community, and we feel her loss as a community. And lastly, I'd like to be associated with the remarks that have been expressed to Ms. Convener Santucci. She is going at a young age, but her short time on this earth has impacted many people. When you listen to the comments and expressions that have been expressed since her passing, it's duly noted that she had sincerely impacted all who came in contact with her. And our condolences go to her entire family. Her father, who's well known by most people in this house, Chaplain Santucci, his wife Karen. Thoughts and prayers are with you at this time. Thank you. Now moving on to other matters. The next item on the order today is the matters of privilege. There are none. The personal explanations, there are none. Notices of motions for adjournment of the House for matters of urgent public notice, there are none. Introduction of government bills. I believe there are 3 to be introduced this morning. The first is in the name of the Minister of Transport. Minister, would you like to introduce your bill?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am introducing the following bill for its first reading, so it is placed on the order paper for the next day of meetings. Motor Car Driver License Renewal Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you. I believe the second is also in your name.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it may be placed on the order paper for the next day of meeting. Motor Car and Auxiliary Bicycles Validation and Amendments Act 2021.
Thank you. And the next bill, the third bill, is that in the name of the Minister of Health. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it may be placed on the order paper for the next day of meeting, namely the Bermuda Health Council Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you. There are no opposition bills, no private members bills, no notice of motions. That now brings us to the orders of the day. And the first matter to be dealt this morning will be in reference to the public health emergency extensions regarding the COVID-19, and that's in the name of the Minister of Health. Minister?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that Standing Order 23-3 be suspended to enable the House to proceed with the consideration of the order entitled Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Extension Order 2021, proposed to be made by the Minister of Health in exercise of the power conferred by Section 107A of the Public Health Act 1949.
Any objections to that? No objections. Continue, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to invite this honorable chamber to consider the order entitled Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Extension Order 2021. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to remind the public of their civil responsibility to take steps to protect themselves, their loved ones, and their neighbors during this global pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus. We live on a very small island, and as we have experienced already, and as recently as late last year, COVID-19 can spread quickly and impact our whole community as scores of people test positive and hundreds end up in quarantine. We can slow the spread of the virus by wearing a mask to cover our nose and mouth, as well as physical distancing, downloading the We Help Bermuda app, and avoiding the 3 C's: closed spaces, crowded places, and close contact settings. The more barriers and space between you and others, the harder it is for the virus to spread. Mr. Speaker, also, after enormous hard work by scientists around the world, there is another layer of protection we can add, and that is the COVID-19 vaccination. As has been said many times, vaccines save lives, and it is no different with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine being used in Bermuda now. Getting the vaccine greatly reduces your chances of contracting COVID-19. In fact, the Pfizer vaccine has been shown to be 95% effective after 2 doses. If you do get COVID-19, you are likely to experience more mild symptoms and become less ill as your body is better able to fight off the virus. This means we can keep people out of the hospital and have fewer deaths due to COVID-19. With a reduced viral load in your system, it is also hoped that you are less likely to transmit the coronavirus as well, although this aspect of the vaccine's power is not fully known at present. Mr. Speaker, of the 14,605 vaccinations administered to Bermuda up to and including Wednesday, February 17th, 8,072 or 55% were given to women, and 6,533 or 45% were given to men. Bermuda's goal of herd immunity will be achieved when 70% of the population, and our population currently is 64,054, has been immunized. To date, 17% of the population has been vaccinated with 1 dose, and 6% of the population has been immunized having 2 doses. These are great results so far, and I thank all those who have taken the steps to get their vaccination to protect themselves, their families, and our community. As a government, we recognize it will take some time to reach that goal of herd immunity, and so a more immediate goal is the immunization of 90% of persons over 65 years, and this is our most vulnerable group. In addition, we continue to encourage our extremely clinically vulnerable persons, healthcare workers, and essential service workers to please get vaccinated. To repeat, preventing infection, the onset of the disease itself, and community spread via mass vaccination will be a critical part of how we navigate our way out of this current crisis. We have all felt the impact that COVID-19 has had on us personally, and we all know how it has impacted our island's economy. Getting vaccinated is an integral part of our ongoing collective effort to reduce the spread of the virus here on the island. And this is essential, not only for our health, but also to help us to allow to return to a sense of normalcy with our daily lives. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, as we all know now, COVID-19 was caused by a new virus that spread quickly throughout the world. Unfortunately, it still exists in large parts because it can be transmitted so easily between people who are in close contact or through coughs and sneezes. While most infected people suffer mild flu-like symptoms, some become seriously ill and even die. It is my role as the Minister of Health. I consulted the Chief Medical Officer and determined that a communicable disease of the first or second category, namely COVID-19, continues to pose a severe threat to public health in Bermuda. This order will extend the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Order 2021, made under the Public Health Act 1949, to permit the governor to continue the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Powers Regulations 2021, which impose extraordinary measures necessary in the interest of public health to prevent, control, and suppress COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will be aware that the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Order 2021 was made under the negative resolution procedure effective on the 25th of January 2021 for 30 days, expiring on the 24th of February 2021. However, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to rage on globally, and a public health emergency continues to exist on our shores. Therefore, in accordance with Section 107A3 of the Public Health Act 1949, I bring this extension order to this honorable chamber to prolong the state of public health emergency for the 60 days ending on the 25th of April 2021. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
MP Dunkley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honorable Minister for that overview of the Public Health COVID-19 Emergency Extension Order 2021. And I guess the first question that I would ask before I make some brief comment into it, the Minister has come to the chamber today by a Zoom meeting and asked for an extension for 60 days. And we all know that COVID has gripped our island home and the world for almost a year now, Mr. Speaker. So it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. But there are some positive changes that have taken place recently that I think give us more hope than we had in some time. So the first question to the Honorable Minister would be, does the Honorable Minister have any idea of how long we think we might have to use this extraordinary order to have it in place, Mr. Speaker? I say that only because I know the answer will be very difficult to come by, but it would be better for, I think, the public to understand more rationale behind the thinking of the government in the extension and only extending it for 60 days, not for a shorter period or for a longer period of time, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, this extension order comes with it significant power and responsibility, Mr. Speaker. And as we in the opposition have said from the beginning of COVID, we've been generally supportive of the moves that government has taken. We've also been supportive of the public health COVID-19 emergency extension orders from the beginning, Mr. Speaker, because we believe it's necessary. We had to take action that no one would have believed would have had to be taken at this time. Mr. Speaker, we all know that this virus can spread very quickly. We found that out at the end of November and right through December, where it spread like wildfire in our community because some people let their guard down. Sadly, and most unfortunately, this virus spreads without knowing it until people actually feel sick or people get tested and they are found to be positive with the virus. So it's a silent challenge. It's a quiet challenge that has rocked the world and rocked our lifestyle, Mr. Speaker. And it will have dire consequences even when we are able to achieve herd immunity. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, many people have been rocked with their health and well-being been put in a fragile state, whether it's a mental health or the physical health. Many people have seen the freedom of their movement. All people saw the freedom of their movement curtailed drastically when we were in the lockdown, and the freedom of movement is still somewhat curtailed at the present time. Many people have felt it with the loss of employment. Many people have felt it with the loss of income and loss of jobs. Families have been separated. This pandemic has struck us and the rest of the world in ways that we would have never foreseen a year ago this time, as we just rounded ourselves into the start of a new year in 2020. And Mr. Speaker, it will take a long time. It will take a long time for the island to recover. And some people may never be able to recover to a position they were within before. That's the length, the breadth, and the severity of the impact of this virus. So the sooner that we can get ourselves in a better position, Mr. Speaker, the better we'll be. And orders like this help us get into that better position, Mr. Speaker, because we found out that we have to make sure that we watch what we do at all times because of this virus. And generally, Bermudians have been very supportive of the policy that's put in place. I've found that Bermudians have been wearing masks and been practicing social distancing, have been doing all of the things that are important, Mr. Speaker. However, there are always a few amongst us that will let their guard down or intentionally take action that could not only impact them, but our community. And that causes us great consternation. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister did mention the vaccination process and where we stand right now, that as of Wednesday, I believe it was, that 14,605 individuals have been vaccinated, 55% of them women and 45% of them male. The minister did mention that she believed, the health officials that informed her, that herd immunity would be effective at 70% of our population vaccinated. And today, I think the minister said that we had 17% that have been vaccinated. So, Mr. Speaker, in looking at many of the hurdles, the challenges we face in rebuilding our lives, rebuilding our economies, getting our children back into the proper school environment, getting our freedom of movement back, able to do things in life that are important to us. Mr. Speaker, one of those big challenges is also the ability to get 70% of our community vaccinated, Mr. Speaker. And why do I say that? Because we've had a great deal of talk, Mr. Speaker, in the time since vaccinations became available on the island, that there is significant hesitancy about vaccination, Mr. Speaker. And so I would ask the question to the Honorable Minister or any one of her government colleagues, what are we doing to address this hesitancy, Mr. Speaker? Because clearly, if we intend to get 70% of our population vaccinated to have this herd immunity that everyone speaks about, and I believe it will be effective if we get to 70%, what are we going to do to make sure we can get to that 70% in a quick as possible time frame? Because the hesitancy is real, certainly amongst the Black population, and I understand much of the hesitancy that people have. I've made it part of my daily movement to have discussions with people about, have you signed up for the vaccination? Have you got the vaccination yet? What are your thoughts on it? And it is amazing to me, Mr. Speaker, that so many people have no intention of getting it or are taking a wait and see attitude, Mr. Speaker. So we have a big hurdle that we need to get over in this case. And if we don't get over that hurdle, we will continue to fight this virus in a more difficult way than is necessary. And so while we've been blessed to have great support from the UK first in making sure that we had the availability of the PCR test, and we managed to launch that program, and the government has heralded the significance and the widespread capacity we have, and it is true, it's helped us in many ways to control the virus in testing, and we're still doing that. It helped us to open our borders and to control the spread of the virus, even with our borders being open. We have to thank the UK for that. We have to thank the UK for our first couple of batches of the vaccinations, which have arrived, and the third batch, which is arriving shortly. Without that assistance and help, we could still be in a very difficult position. But now that we have had that assistance, and now that we have had that help, and it's put us in a position of envy for many countries around the world, because with vaccinations, the Premier has touted that we also rank up there very highly. That ranking can rise even faster and further if we can get rid of some of the hesitancy, because it's all very good for one person to get vaccinated, but we need our community to get vaccinated, and we need to be able to dispel those myths and to make more people get in being comfortable to have the needle, more people being comfortable in having the vaccination, and more people to understand that any side effects for the vast majority of our population are minimal or very small, Mr. Speaker. That's our next big hurdle right now. That 70%, that bar for herd immunity, is a long way off with the hesitancy that we have in our community. And so I would ask the Honorable Minister to give some more information to the public and how we're going to address that. Public service announcements are well and good, but they don't reach down into many sectors of our community, and they certainly don't deal with the personal challenges that some individuals may face. So, Mr. Speaker, with that overview of the public health COVID-19 emergency extension order, I thank the Honorable Minister for sharing it with the opposition leader, myself, and colleagues yesterday. We still face significant challenges within our community in dealing with COVID-19. There are many people who are still struggling at the present time, and the future does look dark quite often. But I have faith. I have faith in Bermuda, and I have faith in Bermudians, because when times are tough, we manage to come together. And times are tough now. We've made great strides with COVID, but we cannot take our foot off the accelerator in this case. We must continue to drive this Bermuda bus forward for a better Bermuda, because COVID can linger, jump up at any time and get us, as we found out in December. And we do not need for that to come back. So in that vein, we support this extension order 2021. Would appreciate the minister's background and some of the questions we asked, and would support the government in urging Bermudians to make sure that we pay attention to the 3 C's, and please sign up for vaccinations, because it will allow all our lives to improve at a quicker pace, and we can all be in it together for a better, healthier Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Dunkley. Does any other member wish to make a contribution?
Mr. Speaker, I have a few words I'd like to share.
MP Jackson, you have the floor.
Thank you. First, I just, at every opportunity, just want to acknowledge and thank so many people in our community who have persevered through these challenging times. It's been a really tough road. Everyone has stuck to the wicket, and as a community, I think that's something that we should be proud of. The other thing that we have an opportunity to be proud of as well is that we're one of the nations that has the vaccine, and we are small enough to get that herd immunity pretty quickly. And if we could just convince or share with the community as often as possible the idea that if we can all get the vaccination and achieve herd immunity, then we can start to open up our borders again as a unique place for visitors to come to the island, because there is the immunity here amongst the population, and it will make the citizens of Bermuda safer because we're vaccinated, and it will also be attractive to the visitors who want to come to Bermuda, because they will understand that the virus is minimal on our shores because we're all vaccinated. And I believe that if we are able to share that message with the community, that may help to motivate some folk that are feeling hesitant about receiving the COVID vaccine. I mean, it's been a number of months. I haven't at least been made aware of any major repercussions or side effects from the vaccine. So I don't believe that the vaccine is taking us into any risky environment. So if we can do everything we can do to encourage as many people to get vaccinated, and then we can promote ourselves to the world as being a jurisdiction that is, quote unquote, COVID free, or have minimal incidence of COVID as local transmission, then we can really get the economy going again. We can start being more active outdoors and get our life back to normal, or as close to normal as we possibly can. So I just wanted to share that idea in case that's something that the government may be able to use in messaging, because I do believe that it presents a powerful argument for vaccination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time?
Mr. Speaker, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, just a short.
MP Cannonair?
Yes, thank you very much. And good morning once again, colleagues and Bermuda. Minister, I just wanted to go through shortly some things that I have seen come to the foresight here, and researching on the vaccine and the challenge that we are having in Bermudian, especially those of us are Black of descent and not coming forward, cautious, concerned about the taking vaccine. I will declare my interest that I have had my first vaccine shot, and I too was leery about the fact that not enough information was being given about worldwide. I think just about the pros in getting this and the fears that we are having in dispelling those fears. I have noticed that the BBC in the UK have gone on a third-party validating promo, which I think is a brilliant idea to get third-party validators out there, whether they be they were talking to doctors and actors and the likes, comedians who were seeing the pros in getting the vaccine to help dispel some of the myths. And I would encourage the government and our minister to maybe speak to the media on how we can go about doing something of similar and having third-party validators in Bermuda promoting this here. We certainly have third-party validators who are dispelling and putting a whole lot of information, misinformation out there about the so-called vaccine, even questioning what is this? Is it a vaccine or not a vaccine? And so we could go a long way in helping dispelling some of those fears. Just to say, or just to come out and say, us as parliamentarians, well, look, go and get the test is not going to be enough. I do have a question about that as well, because when it came up, people were asking me, am I taking it? And I was hearing other folks saying, well, listen, you politicians should wait last, let everyone else go first. And I'm curious as to whether or not the minister has thought about the fact that all parliamentarians should be encouraged to get it, so that we are setting an example to Bermuda to ensure that we get to the levels that we need for herd immunity as soon as possible. I must commend the folks that have already gone out and some of the work that the minister has been doing, and we are still not coming forward. Will be getting, especially those of us of color. So I would encourage our minister to continue to press on. We as the opposition will continue to support in this matter. The shadow minister has been speaking to us on an ongoing basis of his updates with the minister, so I appreciate the correspondence that has been taking place. We are living during a very testing time, and Bermuda, because of its economic prowess in the international world, we are at risk here, and other countries are going to take advantage of this here if we don't get ourselves and get to herd immunity as soon as possible. And I think that threat in and of itself is a challenge, but more importantly, our people in Bermuda need to get to the point whereby it's important that we look out for one another. This herd immunity is vitally important, getting to that point as quickly as possible. We are a destination that you can come. The numbers are speaking for itself. Now we need to back it up and ensure that we get the vaccine. So there were a few other things that I thought about as far as this process is concerned, and having watched the process, I was very curious as to how we're making out. I noticed there were a lot of people who were showing up who were not scheduled to take the test, and so I'm curious as to whether or not we're seeing the numbers of those who have appointments and not showing up going down. I don't know if it's an extensive amount or not, whether or not it is a concern or an ongoing concern by the minister. But I did notice that there were, when I had my test taken, at least 24 folks who were on standby there just in case someone didn't show up. So if the minister could elaborate on where we are with that, as far as people not showing up to the test, is that still an ongoing challenge that we are having? At the end of the day, we need to be also concerned about the disposal of the drug as well. Where are we with that, and are we disposing a concerning amount by the minister of the drug because people are not showing up for their testing? But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I think that we are doing a fairly good job here. The challenge we do have is people coming out sick. So if she can address some of these issues, it'd be wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Remember, we were trying to do a lunch for 12:30 as normal. I'm going to ask, is there any other member, or is the minister, would your concluding remarks be long, or would you like to come back at 2:00?
They will not be long, actually, because we do seem to have bipartisan support, so I'll only be a few moments.
Okay, we'll let you bring this to a close, and then when we come back from lunch, we'll start with the second order of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank honorable members for their contributions. More importantly, I thank them for their willingness to raise their hand and having received the vaccination. One of the issues that was raised concerned the vaccination, and what we're trying to do actually is change the messaging. And instead of referring to vaccine hesitancy, refer to it as vaccine acceptance. Sorry, senior moment. Vaccine acceptance, because we all, I think, appreciate the importance of an immunization as it relates to matters such as COVID. We've seen in the past certain worldwide pandemic diseases have been completely eradicated through proper utilized immunization programs. I'd also like to thank MP from constituency 20 and I share her sentiments for thanking all those frontline workers who have been at the forefront of this COVID exercise since many of them leading up for a year. With respect to the Ministry of Health, I am so incredibly blessed and fortunate to work with the most amazing, committed, dedicated team here at this ministry, as well as those persons from national security, the hospitals, everybody that has contributed, all our frontline workers, towards helping Bermuda to mitigate and navigate through this thing called COVID. Mr. Speaker, there were a couple of questions that were asked, one with respect to what we're doing to address the members' concerns with respect to vaccinations. We obviously have a very strong communications plan, which includes education, open communications, Facebook Live, social media. There'll be a mail out coming out this week, actually, to address that. We invite everybody to go to the government as a resource. There are FAQs concerning the vaccine, concerning COVID, et cetera, on the government website. So we are encouraging people to look at the government website with respect to getting their information, as opposed to unauthorized sources such as on Facebook and the like. And I'd like to conclude by the first question was asked by the honorable member, Mr. Dunkley. He answered his own question. When do we see an end to this? It is difficult to come by, and I'm quoting him. We don't know. We would like to be able to extend this order. Obviously, we're seeking for 60 days. And I would like to be able to represent in 60 days that because of the level of vaccination, that we don't necessarily see a public health crisis continue. But we obviously don't know. Day by day is unfortunately the mantra with respect to COVID. I want to just add real quickly, I did represent these statistics recently at the press conference. It's interesting that from the registrations from the 7th of February to the 13th of February, the disparity between registration for the vaccine concerning the races is starting to greatly decline. So we did see approximately 42% of persons that registered were white and 34% were black, and then the others identifying as other or not caring to choose to indicate their race. So we are seeing that disparity being addressed, and I think it's because of the education, and a lot of people are just kind of having a wait and see. I see you looking at your clock, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank members for their contributions with respect to this, Mr. Speaker. And as such, I move that the said draft order be approved and that a suitable message be sent to Her Excellency the Governor.
Thank you, Minister. Appreciate that very much. There are no objections to that message being sent to the Governor? No objections. The matter has been approved. Mr. Premier?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that this honorable House do now adjourn for lunch until 2 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Members, the House now stands adjourned until 2 p.m.